So, hello and welcome to another bit of a chat with me. But hopefully at some point you've seen some of my videos already. You will notice I've changed out my microphone. In fact, I don't even need this headset anymore, do I? So I've switched over to this desk mic, which I used to use to record court games, but I don't actually. I haven't been using it for a while. But I was told on the last video the pop from my headset was quite high because I have those British pronounced P's. So I've switched over to this microphone. Hopefully the listening experience is a bit better for all of you. So, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Finbar, aka Steelfur, and I am a London-based L5R player. Not like the highest placed in tournaments. I did make top 32 in Worlds before getting out in quite a close game. You may have met some Kotais or Grand Kotais and that sort of thing. I do tend to try and get around on the tournament scene and do as best I can, though I'll appreciate I'm not 100% always the top performing dragon in the field. There's quite a lot of good dragons, so that is fine. So today, I say big reveal, but it's been behind me for the last few minutes as I've been introducing myself. So you're probably starting to get a bit curious. So today we're here to talk about the Skirmish rules for the new format of L5R, which should be launching hopefully today if I've timed this video right and I'm not busy or out of the country when this goes live. And I have just a copy of this document now. We've been testing this format for a while, and I thought it would be a very good idea to have a video ready to go explaining the rules on the day that the content launched, as I know that there are many people out there like me who really just enjoy listening to these sorts of things rather than, trying to read them. And if you have sort of a video you can watch that talks you through thoughts and opinions, it makes the format seem a lot more real, a lot more alive, and gives you a bit of sort of brain fodder for where to go next. So, let's start off with a brief introduction to the Skirmish format, what it is, how it works, and what it's going to change about your experience of L5R. So, the Skirmish format is an alternate way to play L5R, designed for 2 to 5 players, but primarily focused on 1 versus 1. And the main thing that people will note about this, and we'll break down how it does this, is that the time frame for each game is somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes. So people who've played L5R know that the games can be over in 35 minutes, but usually only certain clans. Usually they take an hour. You have 60 to 75 minutes for rounds. And in the end of it, playing an entire round of L5R can feel quite draining, quite tiring. So this format is very much designed as a way to break out of that long-form version of L5R and create a more sort of fluid, fast-paced game that can be enjoyed in a much shorter amount of time. Because one of the consistent pieces of feedback we get from old L5R players and people like that, and this is we as in the community, and other people who don't want to play L5R casually, is that playing a game takes too long and it feels too intense, especially for new players who aren't yet familiar with all the rules and don't really want to get involved in learning a game that's going to take them an hour to play right away. They want to give it a try. They want to be able to knock out a few games. Also, interestingly, this idea of testing decks, testing decks for the main format is hard to do because you need an hour per game to budget to get that test in. And even then, to gauntlet against all the clans, you're talking 7 hours minimum or 6 hours minimum for one game against each clan, which doesn't really feel like it's, an easy way to test. So think about Skirmish. Think about it in terms of it's a faster format. People who've played BattleBox and enjoyed it might enjoy this format as well. And we'll break down then how we sort of get into this. It also is designed with new players in mind, so some of the rules have been tweaked and changed to be simpler so that you can teach them to people and get them hooked on the world of L5R, and then once they're hooked on the world, as we all know, they'll want to get more and more involved, and you can easily upgrade them to the main game. So that's the idea. New format of L5R will be available to play, I have been told, at side events. I know in London we're already planning our own local event, and we're having a prize kit designed by David from Dojo Creative Designs, and that prize kit may be available for other people who want to run their own events with promos for this. I don't have a preview of that now, but I'm sure I'll post one when I've got one. So, let's go down and actually get into the rules. So let's start with decks. So decks are a bit different in this format. Firstly, the lower deck limit is 30 and the upper deck limit is 40, so not 40 to 45, 30 to 40. The rules are that you get no strongholds, no provinces, and no roll cards. Now, because you don't have roll cards, no cards that say keeper only or air roll only can be used in this deck. So you have to keep that in mind. It does reduce the power level of the format slightly, as a lot of roll lock cards are quite powerful. But it also removes that element from deck building, which removes a level of complexity, but it does allow for easier deck building without worrying about rolls, which is very good for new players, and also means that it's a lot easier to tweak decks without worrying if you have to switch to fire or air or something like that. It's a lot easier to test core deck ideas rather than worrying about how rolls are. I think this change will have people on the fence. Some people will be very happy that they don't have to think about roll cards. They'll be annoyed they don't have access to their keepers or some of the cards they've really come to rely on. But I know a lot of people are annoyed by having to consider, 10 rolls every time they want to build a deck. I'm not counting support rolls because no one really considers them, but some people do. Not having to consider those when you're chucking a get together makes the deck process of building an iteration a lot faster, which I know some people will find appealing. So, 30 cards, 40 cards. Each of these cards must be in clan or neutral, so you don't just get to build a deck with whatever. That hasn't changed. Even though you don't have a stronghold, your deck will still be of a clan, so you'll be dragon. And one of the things that we're planning for our promo kit is sort of a template stronghold that reminds you of the rules, but also indicates your clan, so you have something put in front of you that makes you feel like a dragon or something like that. And I feel like in this format, something like that, which reminds you of who your clan is, if it's tokens or if it's a dial or a badge or something like that, that you can put down on the table in front of you, will make your deck feel... Because I feel like strongholds are something that's missing from this format, and I'll probably explain why just briefly. The current strongholds designed for the game are too powerful for Skirmish, but I feel like not having a card that indicates your clan to put down at the start of the game just feels wrong as an L5R player. Certainly someone who played the old game and this game, a stronghold is fairly integral to the idea of L5R, so I will certainly miss that. But I have suggested that perhaps if this format takes off, there could be a series of Skirmish-only strongholds, which are more like more like IDs in Netrunner that guide your deck building and give you a small advantage, rather than the very powerful active strongholds that we've seen in the current form of the game, because they wouldn't really suit the Skirmish format at all. So that's where I've gone with this idea. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked by my own discussions, which, as people who've listened to me before will know, I want to do. So back to reiterate, no stronghold, province, or roll cards, no roll lock cards at all, 30 cards in each deck. You can add to the cards you've purchased with 6 influence. There is no varied influence because there are no strongholds, so you just get that 6 influence for out of clan cards purchased during deck building, and everyone has that, so influence is a level playing field. You don't have like High House of Light and Shirokitsuki with their odd numbers and things like that, so you just have that set number, which is quite a good balancing effect across the clans. Furthermore, because the decks are smaller, no more than 2 copies of a single card by title can be included in any combination of players' Dynasty and Conflict deck. So this makes quite a lot of sense if you think about it, because if you have 30 cards and you can run 3 of them, you're just going to pick your 10 best cards and put them in, and your consistency is going to be really high. You're really going to see those cards all the time, but you're not going to have a lot of deck diversity. So by making it 2, you not only reduce the pressure on people who've bought core, for example, to get in and play Skirmish, because they might be able to play with 2 cores rather than 3, but also you create more diverse decks where the minimum number of cards you include is 15. So that makes sense in a format where decks are smaller. There is a new ban list, which we'll run through probably at the end of the video, I think, because I want to put a bit of time into discussing why each card is probably banned, though some of them will be obvious. And then the other interesting addition, which a lot of people will like for side events. So the plan is, because of how long each of these games takes to play, this will be a best of 3 format, which a lot of players I know from the old game will certainly appreciate, because with L5R the way it is, there is a lot of variance, and when you have best of 3, then you can go up to formats where you have that sort of skill wins out in multiple matches, and the bad flops from 1 or 2 or 3 turns matter less. Also, there will be a sideboard feature available, which is something I know a lot of people are interested in. You get 10 additional cards to modify your deck between games 1, 2, and 3 in a single match against some. So everyone who's played Magic will be familiar with sideboards. They are available for Skirmish in L5R. The one thing to note is that your 6 influence, this will catch a lot of people out, so make sure you don't, is your 6 influence is for everything, including your sideboard. So there was a bit of debate about this, because obviously if you had, there was a discussion as to maybe you might have more influence for your, you could only have 6 influence in your main deck, but you could have like 12 on your sideboard, for example. And that was a bit of an interesting discussion, because it was just really about what sort of tech you want people to be able to put on your sideboard. At the end, the realization was it's just simpler to have 6 overall. You don't want people to be able to just include tons of great, powerful influence cards on your sideboard. You want them to be able to vary their deck a bit, add in a few of the neutral, maybe silver bullet cards, add in a few of their own in-clan tech cards, or maybe they do want to reduce the amount of influence in their main deck and put a few of these key silver bullet cards, but making it 6 influence for the whole makes influence a much crunchier decision, and a much simpler decision as well, and also removes the possibility, and this is very important, that your deck will go over 6 influence during the sideboarding phase, which could result in a game loss or something worse. So very much just making it 1 influence across the entire thing was done for simplification, for ease of use, but also to reduce the power level a bit and just alter the way that people can tech against their opponents, just in a way that stops them just putting tons of stuff there. So to reiterate, deck building, whole of the ban list to check, no strongholds, no provinces, no roll cards, no roll lock cards, 30-30 to 40-40 if you want 40-40, 6 influence for your deck and your sideboard, no more than 2 copies of any single card, right? So we'll get through sort of the simplified game mechanics in a bit, but I want to talk about the rule of 3 first, because when I'm explaining the game mechanics, I'm going to want to explain how they relate to this rule of 3. So rule of 3 here on the left. The rule of 3 is essentially a memory aid to assist you in how you recall the game values for this format, because a lot of them have changed. So the first thing to note is that you have 3 provinces. You have no stronghold province. These provinces are not province cards like the main game. They are just blank province tokens, which is one of the things we're going to be giving away in our London kit. And they have no text, no element, and they are all 3 strength. And they're represented in the game, if you don't have a special token, just by a face-down province card, which then gets removed from the game when it breaks. You lose the game when all 3 of these provinces break. So it's not 3 and then stronghold, it's 3, right? Which is quite relevant. As we'll see when we go into the conflict phase, each player only gets 1 conflict a turn, so you're not going to be breaking 2 provinces on 1 turn unless you've put in a card specifically to let you do that. So 3 provinces means the game could go for 3 turns, or more, depending on how people are attacking and defending. The other thing to note, 3 cards in hand. So 3 cards drawn at the start of the game, 3 cards mulliganed. There is no hand size limit, just like in the main game, but the hand sizes start off a lot smaller. You have to be a lot more efficient with your cards. It creates a very crunchy feeling. Honor dials only go from 1 to 3. So that means, of course, that card draw is smaller. So rather than drawing potentially 9 cards on turn 1, you can only draw 6, which makes a very big difference in terms of using your cards efficiently when you choose to play them. It makes cards a lot crunchier. In practice, when we were playing this, hand sizes never really got as high as they did in the main game, because it sounds like a small difference. You can only draw 2 cards less a turn, but if you think about how games work, really, before the main crunchy conflicts against Scorpion or something, you both bid 5 twice. So if you bid 5 twice, you're 4 cards up. If you bid 5 3 times, you're 6 cards up. So having the smaller dials really does affect everything, and it also affects duels, which we'll get to later on. Each player has 6 fate. That's the same across any of the players. Isn't affected obviously by strongholds because they don't exist. So 6 fate means is quite balancing effect. Each player starts the game with 6 honor, again, blanket across all the clans to balance it. If a player ever hits 12, they win. If a player ever hits 0, they lose. I kind of like to think in this format that you're only ever 3 conflicts away from winning or losing. So if you lose like 3 conflicts where they to your provinces are broken. But also if you lose like, or even if you win 3 conflicts, but your opponent's gaining 6 honor, which isn't that hard to do with lying cards and things like that, then you're going to lose. So you know, those smaller caps mean the game doesn't drag out between honor and dishonor. It can be quite decisive. You have to be kind of worried about it. But equally, because you're only losing 2 if you bid 3-1, the swings are a lot less as well. So everything is kind of, it feels reduced, but actually it gets a lot crunchier with these smaller numbers because you have less fate to buy personalities, which means you fate them less, so they stick around less. Means smaller cost characters become more relevant, which also then in turn means that the numbers required to win or lose conflicts become a lot smaller, which is why there's 3, and then when you add in the 3 strength of each province, suddenly the amount you have to win a conflict by to win, you know, and to break that province is a lot smaller as well, further increasing sort of the crunchiness of that effect. So very interesting what reducing fate, reducing number of provinces does to the speed of the game in terms of how much fate people are willing to put on characters, what sort of characters they're buying. An idea that a thing that I find funny is that you have Volcanic Troll, who in the main game is, well, trolling, unless you're Rob from Norway, Sweden. No, from Sweden. Let's not be silly. The Rob the Viking, as he's known, who runs Volcanic Troll in his deck at events. And you know, when you're doing 4 conflicts a turn, the Fire Ring is very likely to get taken. When you're only doing 2, it's very possible the Fire Ring is never taken and your Troll is a 5/5 the entire time. So, you know, cards, what I like about this format is that it reinvents a lot of cards in a way that the main game doesn't, that lets you use them for different effects and abilities. I think it's quite good in that it provides a completely different way of playing that in turn refreshes a lot of strategies that maybe don't work in the main game and gives you options to play faster and more aggressively in that way. So to get back off my tangent, you have 6 influence. We've said that already, but that's part of the rule of 3, so everything is either 3 or 6. Reduce reshuffle, so if you run through your deck, which is 30 cards, you only lose 3 honor. So just to recap, 3 provinces. If they break, you lose. 3 cards in hand at the start of the game. Honor dials 1 to 3. 6 fate for everyone. 6 honor, win at 12, lose at 0. 6 influence, lose 3 when you reshuffle. So that's the rule of 3. It's very useful to remember things, and it's just sort of I think, you know, it brings down the whole game. It allows it to go faster in a way that a lot of the increased and inflated numbers in the main game slow it down. So, you know, these things were very much designed to create a very crunchy, sort of low effect game. So then to continue talking about game mechanics. So the rule of 3 is sort of setup and ongoing maintenance. So if you look at, first we'll have the Dynasty phase over here. So the first thing to remember about the Dynasty phase, and again, when I said you only have 6 fate every turn, a lot of the other ways to get fate in this format that we've become to rely on have been removed. So that 6 fate may be all you get for the entire turn. There's no Seeker fate, there's no Keeper fate. You do not get Passing fate, the Dynasty phase. So this game is lower cost and crunchy. It rewards you for buying more characters and attacking with them. You therefore do not get a disadvantage for not passing as quickly as possible in the Dynasty phase. So removing Passing fate simplifies the game. You don't have to worry about it in the Dynasty phase. You just have to focus on what characters you want to buy, how much fate you want to spend, and sort of building the board, which is a lot simpler for new players to focus on because they don't have to worry about, you know, oh, but I want to buy these 2 characters. Oh, so my opponent gets an economic advantage, you know. So that was very much an idea to simplify. But also to reduce the amount of fate floating around in the game, which makes it, of course, crunchier and makes single characters and single cards that you spend fate on a lot more effective, which I think is quite effective in this format in terms of how it pushes people to play. The other change is, again, for simplification, which is that there are no actions from hand playable during the Dynasty phase. Now, crab players make it up in arms, but realistically, there are only 1 or 2 events, cards that are played from hand during the Dynasty phase. It's counterintuitive because you can't play attachments or characters during the Dynasty phase. You can only play events, and there are also very few events that actually matter in the Dynasty phase, namely like things like Way of the Crab. And one of the biggest things we've heard about new player feedback is that they don't understand, what happens, and then they get Way of the Crab. It doesn't really, having events from your hand when nothing else can be, just doesn't really make sense during the Dynasty phase, and it's definitely a simplification just to remove the ability to play events. The only exception to this rule are reaction and interrupt events, of which there aren't that many. So, again, you're not going to have to watch for them as much. I can't off the top of my head think of any reaction or interrupt events that are going to be particularly relevant during the Dynasty phase, except, isn't there that duck? There's the duck one that gains you 2 fate, maybe? Or is that a reaction to a conflict being passed? Anyway, there are obviously Dynasty phase events, but I think removing them simplifies the format a lot and removes something that is an issue to try and teach people. Your hand doesn't count, except these 4 things in your hand do, and you can play those, but you can't play these other things. It's a lot easier to just be like, no, unless it's a specific trigger that happens in the Dynasty phase, just ignore it. Okay, done. In the conflict phase, as I think I mentioned earlier, you get 1 conflict. It can be either type, but you only get 1. This has an interesting effect on the flow of the game because it creates a lot more strength on being first. If you can break a province every turn as first player, then you win before your opponent does on turn 3. It also means defending becomes more important. Defending becomes more important anyway because you don't have province effects. Now remember, the primary reason that people are defending or not defending in the main game is to get effects, right? They're trying to get province effects to trigger. Certainly in Dragon, you're running Feast or Famine, Upholding Authority. You're running, I run Public Forum, but you run on Break of X, you run Restoration of Balance. The idea is you don't want to defend, you want to get these powerful province triggers, and you can afford to, because even after they break those provinces, they have to go through Sacred Sanctuary under Stronghold. But in this format, because you have no Stronghold province, and none of your provinces have abilities, a lot of the fear of attacking is removed. So, for example, you're not worried about hitting, a Shameful Display or hitting a really bad province. You're really just worried about whether or not you can take the province and what that's going to mean to you on the defense. So, obviously you don't want to overcommit so your opponent can break you easily in response. But if you're in a safe place to trade, then maybe you do want to try that, and you know that you're a province up, so you can trade, force your opponent to defend, and then you lose tempo, and then you keep your tempo, sorry. Whereas if you're down a province, you may think, okay, well, I go hard on the defense now, but here's my plan to counterattack. And stuff like Centipede Tattoo as a dragon or Indomitable Will, those readies become a lot more important because a lot more important and a lot more balanced. They become a lot more important because you can use them to do a counterattack and possibly break in return. They become a lot more balanced because you can't use them to break 2 a turn. You can only use them to break 1. So your opponent can still, fight you and possibly not lose too much tempo if they're only losing 1 province a turn, or stabilize the next turn. You can't, break 2 one turn and then 2 the next turn and suddenly you've won. The game will always go minimum 3 turns unless you somehow manage to honor or dishonor yourself before then. So that is quite interesting in terms of how it affects balance. One of the things that I found is that I was less... Now, in the main game, there are many reasons you wouldn't want to attack in terms of provinces, endless plains, all these sorts of things. In this format, I was never worried about attacking. I was always worried about the strategy in terms of my defense. So, in the games I've played, we started off just trading and the first player won because we just I won't defend and then I'll have the resources to take a province back from you. And then after we figured out that that wasn't the way to play, we focused on defending a lot more and then counterattacking when it was relevant and when we could take a province, which meant that, and if you could do that successfully, then you were gaining advantage and not giving advantage over to your opponent. So it became a lot more tactical and strategic in terms of when you want to commit to an attack and when you don't. But also you could just take a risk and you're still not going to lose in one turn. If you lose one conflict on the attack and then you lose one on the defense, you've still got the next turn to defend and try and counterattack. So the removal of some of the complexity of the conflict phase in terms of multiple conflicts, in terms of provinces, actually does lend itself to the more strategic flow of L5R, because you remove a lot of that fear from attacking. I mean, stuff like Display of Power still exists, but Display of Power becomes a lot more expensive when you only have 3 provinces that you can lose before you lose the game. And also, as we'll get to later on, some of the rings are powered down a lot, so Display of Power as well doesn't necessarily have the same effect. The other thing to note is the Imperial Favor is type agnostic, so it applies to both conflicts regardless of type. Now that means that it becomes a lot more valuable because it can be used on your strength, military, for example, if you're playing Lion, and against your opponent's strength. So if you're a Lion versus Crane, for example, you might be going military and he might be going political. And if you get the favor, then suddenly you have that point in both. It's very important. The other thing to note is that unopposed honor loss is gone. Part of this is because you start on 6 honor, and you know, if you lose 6 conflicts unopposed, you've probably lost the game. But even if you lose 1 unopposed, and you lose an honor, that takes you down to 5. So that sort of honor loss was seen as too much for the sort of the scope of the game. But also there's the fact that it kind of feels, I don't know, it's just a punishment that feels like it shouldn't be there in this format. You know, you're trying to teach new players to remember the core rules of the game. And I know I've said new players a lot, and this format isn't just for new players. I do genuinely think, as someone who's been playing the game for 2 years, that this is a fresh and exciting way to play L5R. It's really, it's not that it's easier on the brain, because it still has a lot of strategic thinking, because it's broken up into like one conflict a turn, because the games are faster and you can take breathers in between, and because you can play like best of 3, it feels a lot less taxing in terms of getting those games in. Like, I have played 5 games via Jigoku in 2 hours, including a lot of manualing of stuff that was, because it automatically plays with the main rule set. And I'm planning on doing a video on how to play this through Jigoku. It is a bit tricky. There are some things you can't fix, but there are ways to play this format through Jigoku if you want to give it a try and you don't have anyone nearby. So I will be hopefully recording a few videos on how to play this through Jigoku as I play it through Jigoku with a friend of mine, which should be going live hopefully at the same time as this video, but we'll see. I'll talk about this later on, but there is a plan to record some versions of this match and these games both as this video goes live. So hopefully I've successfully beaten my time schedule and managed to get those videos out alongside this introduction video so that you can listen to the rules and also watch how the game is played both online and in person at the same time. So hopefully I've succeeded on that. If I've not, feel free to give out to me and I'll try and record some games when we have our London Skirmish tournament. To return, so no unopposed honor loss, just because that's something new players forget a lot, but also you know, it was just felt that it increased the honor loss too much in this format of the game. Then in the fate phase, again, we have another place where fate is not added to the game. So no passing fate, 6 fate a turn, but also no fate goes on unclaimed rings. So it removes a lot of the strength of being the first player on a particular turn. It also, again, removes the amount of fate available to everyone in all areas of the game, which makes that 6 fate you get at the start of your turn even more important to like measure and manage how you're going to spend it through the whole game, which teaches you a lot about fate management, which is good actually as a skill to learn for the main game in terms of how much fate you've got on your turn and how you're going to use it, which is also good for new players to learn as well, again making this a very new player friendly format. So no fate on unclaimed rings makes that 6 fate quite crunchy. What it also does, all the fate things added together, also reduces the cost curve of this game. So in the old game you might buy a 5 cost on turn 2 with 3 fate on. To do that in this game you have to have spent 4 fate in a whole 1 turn, right? Which you could do, and that 5 cost is probably going to be the most powerful thing on the board, but we're talking about attacking and defending. If you buy a 2 cost and a 1 cost, and if that 1 cost could also break a province and you can defend with the 2 cost, then suddenly you're in a position where you can both attack and defend. And if your opponent has just bought a 5-cost character and has no way to ready them or doesn't have the fate to do it, and that's turn 2, what happened on turn 1? Did you break a province with your 1-cost character? Whereas they couldn't do anything because they already had 1 character on the board, so you defended them. Like in the Dragon example, I imagine turn 1 you're flipping a Niten Adept and a Doom Shigenja, right? The Doom Shigenja can break a 3-strength province by herself. The Niten Adept can potentially defend your province against a 1-cost that your opponent has bought. So you defend, and then you counterattack with your Doom Shigenja. If your opponent hasn't got anything, you break the province, right? Those numbers are so small that buying those cheaper 1, 2-cost, 3-cost characters becomes so much more relevant and impactful, which is good, because as I said with Volcanic Troll, it means that decks are going to see play of a lot of characters that wouldn't make it the cut in the new format, but do make a lot of sense in this other format. And I'm really, really keen to see what people do with deck building. I have a video that I'm going to release at the same time as this as well, as part of my prepared content, which just has suggested deck lists from just made up or from people who've been playing this with me, to give you a bit of a start if you just want to have something you put together and play with. But obviously I expect the really good players of each clan who, if they like this format, to put together some good decks for their faction. The other change, which is interesting, is that cards aren't discarded from broken provinces. Now, this is done primarily to stop your deck cycling too fast when you've only got 30 cards, and to stop you losing that one of those 2 copies of the card you have in your deck. Like, you can imagine how bad it is if you didn't have time to buy a character that turn, and you've only got 2 of them in your deck, and that just went, and it was your only one, and suddenly you don't have your Mitsu for the game, you don't have your Niten Master for the game. That feels bad. So that was done to stop cards being discarded from provinces. It does create an issue that's on my internal watch list, which is what happens with holdings. So you can imagine that Akuni Labs just sitting there can't be discarded, giving all your opponent +1/+1 is quite powerful. So I personally was in the camp that maybe cards should just cycle as normal, or maybe holdings should cycle as normal, so that you don't have that problem where your provinces, because you can discard them, but you can't discard your opponents. Now, there are solutions to this being printed. For example, we've just had Season of War spoiled, so we're going to be seeing how that plays out over the next 2 weeks before this skirmish format launches. And there may be ways that holdings will deal with themselves with Rally and the Season of War and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter if they're discarded or not. But equally, I think I personally am going to be watching to see how holdings are affecting the game. But this is a side event format, and it's a live document, so just like the main game, and I think probably easier than the main game, if after 100, 200, 300 more games of this are played, something needs to be changed in the rules. I think FFG might be a lot more open to tweaking the rules to improve the format, because it's not their flagship format, which means that it's a lot more susceptible to change if we see that something is negatively impacting the gameplay. So on to the next rules change. There are only a few more. Ring effects. So majority of rings operate the same way. The only difference is, and these are mostly just powering down or powering up, because in testing we found the Earth Ring was taken pretty much by the first player every turn, because you're only drawing maximum 6 cards a turn. Against some people, you're not even drawing that because they want to keep the bids low, and they can do that because they're still drawing 1 card versus 3, which is not as bad as drawing 5 versus 1, which can ruin completely. So we found that Earth was pretty much being taken every time. So it was decided to power down the Earth Ring to be that you can choose either or. So you either draw a card or you discard one from your opponent's hand. It's just a nice change. It keeps the core of the Earth Ring, but it lets you choose which you think is going to be more advantageous to you, which is kind of important for how you think about power in the game. Air was changed because of the reduced honor win limit. Gaining 2 honor was seen as just too powerful, so it was changed to just keep the take 1 honor effect. So still good for winning an honor victory. If you trigger it 6 times, you've won the game, for example, and it can help you get up there, especially if you've got other little honor effects going, but not gain 2, trigger it 3 times, win the game. So I think that was a fair change given the reduced honor costs. Fire is the same. Void is the same. Water was changed to be better because water wasn't being taken that much at all because of the smaller boards and things like that. So water was changed to be that it can target any character with one or fewer fate, right? So it made a bit of a nerf in terms of how much it readies characters, but a boost in terms of who it can bow. So the game, as played with less fate, means that there's less fate on characters. You might buy a character with 2 fate on. Assassinate is a lot more expensive, so you're more likely to buy 2 cost and 1 cost characters with 1 or 2 fate on. And this, now the Water Ring can choose and bow any character. So the Water Ring, choose a character in any player's home area with 1 or fewer fate on it, and either ready or bow that character. So if you've got a 1 fated character, it can now be bowed by the Water Ring. But you can also only ready a 1 fated character with the Water Ring. So there's none of this buy a guy with 3 fate on, keep him around the entire game, and then ready him with Water Ring every turn. It can only target limited things. So those changes, I think they make a lot of sense. The Water Ring change makes it a lot more impactful, so people are more likely to take it in more situations. The Air Ring change, very much a reduction in power to match the reduced honor gains needed to win. And the Earth Ring, very much a reduction in power to reduce the strength of the Earth Ring in a game where the card draw is a lot shorter, a lot smaller. So you're only drawing 1 to 3 cards a turn on your bid dials. Yeah. So then there's just a bit about province tokens. Each province is represented just by a province card back. They are 3 strength, no element, no game text, neither face up nor face down, or are they ever revealed. Now, as a Dragon player who just got a load of cards in this cycle that turn my provinces face down, the fact that they're never face up or face down, it makes all those cards irrelevant if they weren't already. Unfortunately, I'm not the biggest fan of this theme. But since they don't have reveal effects, that's fine. This does more impact things like Unicorn, who have a lot of, when this province flips, face up cards like Shinjo Trailblazer, and it affects Crane, who have a lot of, or who I think in this cycle, I think we've seen 1 or 2 already, but they're getting that, it seems like they're getting that theme of face up provinces as their theme to match Dragon turning them face down and Unicorn having them face up, and all the Eminent Province theme. It seems like Crane might be getting face up provinces, so those cards won't work in this format either. This is just done to simplify it. There was a lot of discussion about whether you have a province token that then is a face down token, which then gets flipped into a face up token and can be turned face down again, and what state is the token in. In the end, it was decided that you didn't want people to have a specific token, to have something that was two-sided. You just want them to be used the back of a province card to do this. So for simplification reasons in terms of token gameplay and things like that, it was just decided to make it either face up or face down. Because in practice, it doesn't really break that many cards. It breaks a few. It breaks a few alright cards. It breaks a few janky cards. I don't think people are going to miss... I mean, Shinjo Trailblazer would be very good in this format, but I don't think people are going to miss face up or face down province interaction all that much if they don't have abilities that do on reveal. And when that province is broken, you just take whatever token you're using and set it aside out of play, or the ones that we've got for our event, just turn them upside down and they say broken in big letters. It does, however, keep refilling cards, so you just can keep playing normally. You don't have to worry about losing production of that. So, I'll briefly talk. I've got 1 or 2 more things to talk about. I'm briefly going to talk about multiplayer rules. Then I'll talk about change to dueling, which I think is quite impactful. And then I'm going to run through the ban list. So there's a lot of cards on there that people won't be surprised about. So, and then I'll probably just do a brief recap of everything, so that if you just are worried or confused about stuff and you just want a quick recap, you can watch like the last 5 minutes of this video and get a complete rundown on all the rules again. So, more than 2 players. In the draw phase, instead of 2 players comparing their bid against one another, each player compares their honor bid against all other players. So you know, for example, if I bid 3 and both the other people bid 1, I'm going to give them both. Sorry, no, that's not how it works, because when comparing 3 or more honor bids, each player gives 1 honor to each player who bids lower than them. So if I bid 3 and they both bid 1, I have to give them each 1 honor. That's fine. But equally, if they bid 1 and I bid 2, I also have to give them 1 honor. So Bidding 3 seems to be quite good in that. You still have to pay 2 honor, but you don't have to pay 2 honor. Well, you don't have to pay 4 honor to each of them. Declaring conflicts. Each player has 1 conflict opportunity. That means 5 players each get to declare 1 conflict in a single game round. The Imperial favor is given to the player whose glory total is higher than each other player's individually. If people are tied, then if 2 or more players are tied, then it remains in its current state. Don't know how many people are going to play this in a multiplayer format, but it is an option if you want a faster multiplayer game that doesn't have as many rules going on. So maybe give that a try. So then let's talk about the change to dueling. So dueling is one of those things that keeps coming up as a point of contention. People either hate it because it's bully dueling and they don't actually have a chance to win, or they like it because, well, it's one of these things. Thematically, bully dueling makes sense. My character has got 17 military strength. She's an amazing fighter. Your character has 1 military strength. I should win every single duel that I fight against your character. You know, Hitomi shouldn't be losing when she's got all of her attachments on against a 1-cost character, right? So bully dueling, whilst it feels bad, is arguably thematic in the main game, right? However, in this format where everything is being reduced and made simpler and just sort of, you know, letting people try out new things and new ideas, the decision was made to make dueling more of a mini game and less reliant on skill. So the way to remember this is bid first, skill second. And what that means is, instead of adding the dueling character's skills to each player's bids in a duel, players compare their bids directly to determine the outcome of a duel. The player whose dueling character has a higher skill value adds 1 to their bid to increase the duel total. So let's break this down in practice. My 4-2 Hitomi is dueling your 1-1. What character don't I like? All the characters I don't like have dashes in political and Scorpion. So let's think of something else. Okay, my 4-2 Hitomi is dueling your 1-1 Taoist Adept, right? Okay. Our bids can go from 1 to 3. I bid 2. No. Yeah. You bid 1, and I bid 2. No. What's the best example of this? So an example of how we tie, for example, if you bid 2 and I bid 1, then your bid is 2 and you get no bonuses because your character is 1 strength. Because my character is 4 strength, I get +1. So the duel would be a tie, even though you bid 2 to my 1 and you would give me 1 honor. If, for example, we both bid 3, then I would get +1 to 4 and I would win, even though we both bid 3. And if, for example, I bid 2 and you bid 1, I would give you 1 honor and I would still win because I would have 3 to your 1. So it's very easy to remember. The player who has more skill gets +1 to their bid, but bids are actually all that matters. This change, I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to test it a huge amount. I find it interesting. I do like the fact that it's creating this mini game that you can play, and I do like the fact that it gives lower cost characters who don't have attachments on the opportunity to win duels. So, you know, things like Taoist Adept, your 1-1 duelist. If you want to spend an honor to trigger her ability or effect, you can. You know, you might still lose, but if they bid 3, you know, you're going to get some honor back, probably. So think about, because if I dueling him against someone bigger, I'm going to bid 2. If they bid 1, then the tie. Maybe if I really want to win, I'll bid 3. And then I only have to give them 2 honor, so it's not really that much to worry about. Someone like Prudent Challenger, who honors the winner, you know, suddenly you might be willing to spend 3 to get, you know, him +2, him honored, because he's a 2-2 with 2 glory. You know, you might want that effect. So, you know, it does open up the field of smaller, cheap duelists in terms of you may want to invest in them. It also means that your duelists don't have to be towers. And, like, for example, you don't have to tower to beat Toshimoko, for example. You know, you may have to beat him by 1 skill so that he can't just bid 3 and win, but you don't have to, like, out-tower him to the massive amounts. There might still be a race, but, you know, the numbers could also be a lot smaller. So I think it opens up dueling a lot. I do wonder, because it, you know, it doesn't necessarily feel amazing if your 17 strength amazing military tower gets beaten by a 2 cost, or you have to spend honor to make that character win, when that character is so far ahead of the other character in terms of military skill. They should just be winning the duel, right? But, you know, if you want to talk themes, thematically, is Hitomi showing up to that duel with her favored mount and her, you know, her weird swords and her army and her followers and whatever? Or is she coming to that duel where her opponent has chosen the weapon? She's only allowed to use, you know, one sword, or, you know, something like that, where, you know, they're taken away from their huge retinues and their huge invested attachments and all the things that make them, that they take to the battlefield, and they're just fighting in a room where anyone could theoretically win. You know, though the person who has the highest skill is obviously more advantaged because they've had more practice. You know, there's also ways to thematically spin it. In terms of, is it going to work, I'm putting together a duelist deck for this format that will test how much I want my duelist to win without attachments and without huge amounts of skill. So we'll see. I am very open to trying new ideas in this format that make it crunchier, that make it more interesting. I think this dueling change is something that people may respond to well, because, let's face it, bully dueling is not something that people respond to well at all. And also the fact that it's not 1 to 5 bids means that putting 3 down to make sure you win doesn't feel nearly as bad as having to put 5 down. So let's give it a try. So the last thing to talk about before I get into sort of my recap is just the restricted list. I don't think people are going to be surprised by a great deal many cards on here. Guest of Honor's banned because embargo effects are terrible. Charge is banned because it's still too fate efficient even in this format. Kurada District, Imperial Palace, Kanjo District, Hidden Moon Dojo are all banned because the limit 1 per holdings are still too good. Way of the Chrysanthemum's banned because you only have to get 12 honor to win, and if you do a 3-1 bid and then get 4 honor, you only need to get 2 honor to win. So it's kind of broken in this format. Master of Gisei Toshi is banned because you only get 1 for conflict a turn, and if you can lock your opponent out of playing events during that conflict, you can definitely break a province every single conflict, which means Phoenix wins as a first player every time. Alibi Artist is banned because card draw is so important in this format. Daisho is banned because of the reduced honor totals and also how MPE it feels. And also it kind of breaks the new dueling mechanic because, you know, your opponent can never bid, never bid in the way to win. You don't even have to bid as much. And then Chronicler of Conquests, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what this card does. I don't know if it's been spoiled yet in the Dominion cycle, so we won't talk too much about that, but I assume it was just seen as a problem and preemptively banned before it could become a problem. So this is the Skirmish format. I realize this video is about 48 minutes long, but, I think, if you wanted to read the rules, you could just read the rules. I think if you want to listen to this video, you want my thoughts and my takes on various things. Maybe you like hearing this in this audio format. I know certainly I always learn better when I'm hearing people explain things to me, and that prompts more thoughts in my head rather than just, sitting back and reading a piece of text. So, to recap, deck building. No Stronghold, Province, or Roll cards. No Roll cards at all. 30 to 40 cards in your deck. You have 6 Influence. No more than 2 copies of a card per title. That's 2 types of Tadaka, not, in either deck. So you can only have 2 Tadakas, Conflict, or Dynasty between your entire deck. No cards on the ban list, and a separate ban list for this format, so please check it when you're building. And then for tournament play, you get 10 cards for your sideboard. In addition to this, those 10 cards also count within your 6 influence, so you can't put any cards that have influence on if you've already used your 6 for your main deck. Then in terms of simplified game mechanics, Dynasty phase, no passing fate, no actions from hand unless they say reaction or interrupt. Conflict phase, 1 conflict each, can still be either type, and you can still gain additional conflict opportunities through card effects like Oushi or Dueling Crane that gives you an extra conflict, or other effects we're going to see. Imperial Favor is type agnostic, so applies to both types of the conflict. There's no unopposed honor loss, so you do not lose 1 for not defending, but you're going to want to defend anyway. No fate on rings in the fate phase. The fate can still be placed on or spent to rings by card effects like Kitsuki Investigator. Cards are not discarded from broken provinces. There are 3 new ring effects. Air loses gain 2 and just remains take 1 honor from your opponent. Earth keeps the same effect but changes it to ore, so you can either draw 1 card or discard 1 card at random from your opponent's hand. And water can only target characters with 1 or fewer fate, but can bow or ready that character. So can't ready anyone with 2 fate on, but can bow characters with 1 fate on. So ready and bow anyone with 1 fate on it. Then, let's remember dueling. Bid first, skill second. You count the dials, and then the character with the highest skill gets +1, whatever they put on their dial. Doesn't count for the honor exchange, just counts for the duel total after bids have been revealed. That's very important. Then the rule of 3 provinces, no strength, 3 strength, no element, no game text, not revealed or unrevealed, always not face up or face down, just existing. If you lose 3 provinces, you lose the game. 3 cards in hand. Honor dials, including bids, go from 1 to 3. There's no hand limit, but you're not going to be drawing that many cards. 6 fate at the start of each turn. Start the game with 6 honor. If you get 12, you win. If you get 0, you lose. 6 influence to spend on cards. A reduced reshuffle, so you only lose 3 honor. And that is pretty much it. So, as I said, I'm excited for this format. I've played quite a few games of this on Jigoku and in play. I expect to play a lot more. In London, we have a tournament booked. We've already got it in there, but it's sort of sneakily hiding at the moment as a new format event. And I think it's down for the... just let me check. I think it's down for the 18th of April. And our plan is certainly to stream, if not record, the games from that tournament. So it should be an exciting time to get a view on how this game plays if you haven't had a chance to test it yourself, or if you're on the fence. But I think given how quick it is to play a game, everyone should be sleeving up a deck and giving this a try. I think it's going to be refreshing for people who spend a lot of time playing traditional L5R to be able to play that quick format and sort of get a few games in and just see how it feels. I know certainly, and I think this is true, that some people aren't going to like this. There are a lot of players in this game who enjoy the fact that they can sort of eke out a slow economic advantage over 60 minutes of gameplay and then always sort of get that. I will say that just because you can't do that in a singular game, if it's best of 3, the player with the highest skill will still win, because they'll make less mistakes over the 6 to 10 turns of the 3 games, rather than just the one game where there's 5 to 7 turns. So the player with the most skill will still win in a best of 3 format, especially when you add in sideboards. And sideboarding is a skill in and of itself. But I know that some people won't like the reduced, we'll say the reduced feeling of slow benefits over time that you can get in the main game. But equally, I think the positives in terms of how quickly you can play the game and how it feels to play this different format versus, the long drawn out 1 hour games of the main format will provide a refreshing break for players, and they may find themselves really enjoying sitting down at a side event in a Kotai after playing a day 1 of grueling, 6 rounds, 6 hour matches. Maybe they all went to time. Maybe you're really knackered. Second day, you're going to take out your deck, knock out 3 games in probably 75 or 90 minutes. And, it's going to feel completely different. They're going to be faster. They're going to be more dynamic, more engaging. And I think because, for instance, myself, I have been playing a lot of Keyforge on day 2 of L5R, where I don't make the cut, where the 2 tournaments are co-located, like the UK Games Expo or the recent Grand Championship. Because after I've played a day of L5R, especially if it hasn't gone well, and I've only gone like 3-3 or 4-2, I haven't made the cut, the last thing I really want to do is sit down with the same deck, or even, and to be honest, even play a joke deck, which isn't going to win as much, because that feels bad at that level of playing in that sort of competition. So I often actually have ended up just going and playing Keyforge, like Keyforge Sealed or Keyforge Pods, just because the games are best of 3 and they're faster. But now if you say to me, okay, well, you can play L5R with a different deck, and it's going to be faster, it's going to be more aggressive, and it's just going to be a bit more of a laugh, I say, all right, cool, sign me up for that. That sounds fun. I think it's going to make grinding prize tickets at side events a lot more fun, and just in terms of getting through as many games as possible, and also just enjoying those games in a more casual way. So definitely looking forward to it. I will, of course, I've really decided I like this format, and I plan on putting out content both this week as the format comes out, and also as we get our event running and things like that, in terms of maybe doing a stream or two if I can get it working on Jigoku in a good way. Though I'll do a video on how I have got it working, but surely there'll be a conversation if this format takes off about whether or not it's worth making a separate version of Jigoku that runs the game. That's not for me to decide because I'm not a coder, so I'll have to leave it there. All right, so thank you all for listening. Let me know if you have got any questions that I haven't answered. As I said, I'm fairly enthusiastic about this format, so I hope everyone else is as well. And look forward to my other content, which reviews this format later on. So from now, for me, goodbye and good luck.